Mario, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I guess my question is sort of related. It's about Ancient Man. I had watched the Science Channel, and they did sort of like a modern man and a caveman type situation. Long story short, they finally bring down an elk, and they use an atlatl, and you can very clearly sort of see the spiritual sort of reverence of this elk. You know, they're really hungry, they're having a tough time surviving. They bring down this elk, they're almost sort of instinctively carving, you know, the story of the hunt into the trees. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how Ancient Man is using, you know, religion to help explain the world around him, and how that came about, or if that was even an acceptable means, you know, to eventually get to science, I guess.
Well, I think it's Christopher Hitchens who describes religion as our first and unfortunately worst attempt at science, and an explanation of the natural world. And that's fairly well understood. Who would like to take this one?
I'm actually surprised at how we do see a focus on things like trying to explain nature, because I think the first great mystery we would have encountered would have been death, and I think we all have a sort of a natural obsession with death, especially when we've lost somebody. So I would have thought that there would have been a real focus on the afterlife in early religions, or in early documents of religions. But more often we see things about combat deities, deities that grant victory, and explanations of nature in non-combative tribes. So I can see the hunt being important, but I can also see, you know, the mysteries of the stars and the mysteries of life and death being one of the earliest focuses for religion. And yet I don't think we see that. I wonder why.
Can I take issue with that? I mean, firstly, I'm not aware of any civilization throughout history that hasn't created some sort of theology or belief system. And I think it's a fairly common theme amongst all of them that they have an explanation for the afterlife, or a description of the afterlife. Am I wrong about that?
Yes, there's a really brilliant article about a very primal tribe. I think it was in South America that there was this missionary that goes to visit them, and he lives with them for a number of weeks. And it's an entirely atheist tribal culture. And when he tries to explain his Christian beliefs in him, they're all laughing at him about how ridiculous every one of the things that he promotes are, and they convert him in the course of the story. And
yeah. But that's only one that I'm aware of, and we've discussed that one before. But most civilizations, apart from that one, I think all of them that I'm aware of, have created some sort of theology, and it always includes something in relation to the afterlife. Michael, I think you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, actually, that's the story that Aaron just told is a hoax. Unfortunately, it's not true. Yes.
Oh, drats.
Don't
you hate when beliefs that you held on to for years and years and years turn out to be total crap? Darn it.
I'm going to believe it anyway, Aaron.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It was the anthropologist Dan Everett published this story, and it's completely wrong. They did not only had theistic beliefs, but it had been published and recorded by other anthropologists. It was sorry, but for DPR's point, many Eastern religions and certainly many pre-technological religions or tribal religions, or called tribal religions, don't often actually have much to say about the afterlife. Many parts of Eastern religions as well are more concerned with the proper production and proper performance of ritual. So I think it's a Western bias that we have to say that we have more of a focus towards the afterlife. It just doesn't carry over all of the time to all sorts of religions. Or
which Eastern religions are you thinking of?
Certainly.
Sorry, by my count, they're very different in many ways, but they still, there's still ancestor worship. There's reincarnation in some places. There's Some of them had the concept of a heaven and a hell before the Western religions really properly had that, the way we know of them now. So I would take issue with that.
Okay, well, Shintoism certainly and Confucianism are much more concerned with the, like you say, ancestor worship. Well, they don't actually explain exactly how ancestors exist or what the importance is, but the central tenets of their religious belief are more about how to properly perform the ritual, to praise or to give thanks to their ancestors, rather than exactly what the nature of the afterlife is.
And I have to question atheismo on this, because when you talk about other cultures that were not related to the Semitic cultures having a concept of heaven and hell that was similar to theirs, I'm not aware of anything like that either. I mean, you have
Buddhist hell, for example. Well, Hindus had a concept of lower and lower regions for if you were reincarnated and you continued to misbehave, you'd go to a worse and worse place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it was supposed to be based on the karma of what you did in that life, and so it was your fault if you were reborn into a lower condition. But other places bordering on the Semitic cultures had a belief in the land of the dead, and it was simply a place where everybody went. And it good or bad or indifferent, it didn't matter. You all ended up in the land of the dead. Then you had the Zoroastrians that came up with the idea of judgment based on your works, wherein the righteous people would ascend into the kingdom of justice and truth with Ahura Mazda, or they would descend into the kingdom of the lie under Ahriman, and that Ahriman the opposer, the original concept of Satan, and that this is where the Semitic cultures got their idea of heaven and hell, until Christianity came along and changed it from being judgment on works to judgment on gullibility.
Similar in the way that they were sorted or the criteria that they were being chosen, but clearly the Semitic cultures got it from Zoroastrianism, and then Zoroastrianism clearly, if you do a side-by-side comparison between their scriptures and the Hindu scriptures, that it's clearly an east to west flowing belief. Obviously, the way people are judged, in the Semitic monotheism, it's more about who you follow rather than what you did. But certainly, you're looking at likely the Indian subcontinent as the origin of the hell, as being the maximum security spiritual prison for the worst people.
I can't speak to that. I've never read of a concept of Hindu hell, although I have come across Hindu demons.
Mario, did that sort of address the point that you wanted to raise? Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
No, I think you got it. I was just curious if there was any further sort of evolution of that. I mean, obviously we have science, and just curious about Judaism versus Islam, I guess, because there's a disproportionate amount of peace prizes, that if you're under Judaism, that people have been awarded versus Islam. So I was curious if there was sort of an evolution of that religion that allowed them to be more inquiring, I guess, if anyone had any.
What you've got is that Christianity has reaped a lot of benefit simply from being in the European environment and not stifling out everything that was born in the Renaissance, taking advantage of some of that. When you get into the earliest incarnations of Islam, it didn't yet stifle out the scientific progress, and so they made a great deal of scientific progress early on. And then as the dogma gained strength, the science lost strength, and that's why you're not seeing many Nobel Prizes for Muslims now. That's my opinion.
A quick story. I knew a guy, he was dating a girl from Vietnam who, her family, they were Buddhists, somewhat traditional, and they had the shrines to the ancestors in the main room. And okay, now he told me the story. He's sitting in his recliner. His girl, he was living with his girlfriend. She's out shopping, and she's put out some food for these
going the wrong way.
These black and white pictures, and there's candles of their ancestors. This is offering of food to the ancestors. Now he says, I didn't really understand quite how literally she took it, right? So I'm reclining, I'm watching TV, and because there's no, like, Buddhist homes often have like a little alcove to which you put the shrine, you know, it's a Western style home, it didn't have that, so it was just right there with all the other furniture, and he's leaning, and just to his left is the shrine with the plate of food, and he's so relaxed, and he sees that there's an apple on there, and the apple's starting to look really good, and he says, well, you know, there's apples in the fridge too, but I'm feeling pretty relaxed, and she's not going to be home for hours. So he takes the apple, and he eats it, and he leaves it on the little table to his right. And then he just sort of almost dozes off, completely forgets to replace the apple and throw away the evidence. So she comes home with the shopping bags in hand and looks at him, and then she looks at the apple, and then she looks at the tray where the apple was, and she looks at the apple core again, and then she looks at him, and he said... and then she looks back at and she just throws a fit, throws her back to the floor, and says, "What are you doing? That was for my paternal great-grandfather." And he says, "Well, it's okay. He said I could have it."
I took my son to a Hindu temple, and they had laid out all this food for Krishna. And they said that whatever Krishna does not eat is for us. And, of course, we know that that's going to be the entire volume of whatever food they lay out. But my son said something brilliant. He was 12 years old, and he said, if you eat after other people, if you eat the same food after someone else does, then you get sick. But if you eat after a god, do you get healed? And I thought that was especially astute for a 12-year-old. Why didn't this woman walk in and assume that her paternal grandfather had eaten the apple? That was his apple.
That's what I was wondering, too. That seems like a really important question, right?
I mean, I wonder about these Hindus when they lay out all this food for Krishna and they're going to eat whatever he doesn't. Do they ever turn around and find that stuff was taken?